Imagine a city, not like any other, built entirely around one thing: production. A city that rose from humble beginnings to become the heartbeat of the Industrial Revolution. This is Manchester, but not the one you know today. In the 1850s, this was Britain's workshop, a city shaped by coal, steam, and the hum of machines that worked tirelessly around the clock. Take a deep breath and feel the thick, smoky air that blankets the city. It's heavy with coal dust and cotton lint, the byproducts of the machines that churn day and night. The sound is deafening, the constant hum and clatter of machinery, the rhythmic thumping of engines, and the unrelenting pace of industrial labor. What you see before you is a city that is anything but organic in its growth. This isn't a city that slowly evolved over centuries. No, this is a city that exploded into existence, built on the foundation of bricks, smoke, and fuel. This is a city where the pace of life is dictated by the machines that run it, where everything from the workers to the factories moves in sync with the relentless rhythm of industry. Now, let's step into this world. The world of 1850s Manchester, a city that transformed the modern world at a cost. The innovations that arose from this industrial hub set the course for the future, but they also created a harsh reality for the men, women, and children who powered the engines of progress. The rise of Manchester. In the early 1800s, Manchester was just another market town, serving the surrounding rural areas. The population barely topped 20,000, and the city was defined by its quaint streets, local markets, and modest shops. The Industrial Revolution hadn't yet reached this northern city in any significant way. It was a place where church bells rang, water-powered mills, and tradespeople worked with their hands. But by the 1850s, Manchester was unrecognizable. No longer a sleepy market town, it had transformed into a sprawling industrial metropolis. The population had skyrocketed to over 300,000, a testament to the magnetism of industrial growth. Factories, powered by steam engines and fueled by coal, now dominated the landscape. The city was being consumed by machines. The rise of the cotton industry was Manchester's initial spark. As factories began popping up across the city, they consumed all available resources. Factories replaced homes, and the rhythm of life became dictated by the machines within them. Workers, often including children as young as 5 or 6, operated the looms and spinning machines that produced the fabric that would be sold worldwide. What was once a quiet city had become a relentless force of industry. The city, powered by machines. By the time you step into the heart of Manchester in the 1850s, the city hums with life. But it's a different kind of life. The noise is constant, the churn of engines, the grinding of metal, the turning of wheels. The air is thick with soot, and the smell of coal burns in your nostrils. The factory floors are where the action happens, where the engines of progress work tirelessly, without rest. It's impossible to ignore the scale of it all. These are the early days of mechanization, and the sheer size of the machines is overwhelming. Inside the factories, workers don't speak. They communicate through gestures, as the sound of the machines drowns out any attempt at conversation. They must read the rhythm of the machines, anticipating their every need. If a machine malfunctions, the workers know to respond immediately. One slip-up, 1 second of hesitation, and injury is imminent. The machines that dominate the factories are powered by steam. Engines that drive the looms, pumps that extract water, and massive spinning machines that churn cotton into fabric. But the machines are not kind. They are unforgiving. Workers are constantly at risk, fingers lost to spinning wheels, arms crushed by moving parts. The workers are subjected to long hours, 12, 14, or even 16-hour shifts 6 days a week. And for all this labor, they earn only meager wages. Scene 3. The strain of overcrowding and poor living conditions. As the factories expand, so does Manchester's population. The city's growth, however, isn't as graceful as its industrial progress. The surge in population leads to overcrowding. Whole families are crammed into tiny, unsanitary homes, if they are fortunate enough to have a home at all. Many workers, especially those who have migrated from rural areas or from Ireland, live in what are known as back-to-back houses, small, cramped units with no proper ventilation or privacy. The city's rapid urbanization leads to severe sanitation issues. With no proper sewage system in place, waste is dumped into the streets or carried to the river. The air is thick with smoke from factory chimneys, and the smell of coal and cotton fills the lungs of every resident. Disease is rampant. Cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis spread quickly through the working-class neighborhoods, where people live in close quarters with little to no sanitation. In 1851, more than 13% of Manchester's population was made up of Irish immigrants, many of whom fled the Great Famine in Ireland during the 1840s. They arrived in Manchester seeking work in the factories, but the conditions they encountered were no better than those of the locals. They lived in the poorest districts of the city, with little access to clean water or medical care. The working conditions were harsh, and many suffered from chronic illness and disease. The death rate was high, and the average life expectancy in the poorest neighborhoods was just 26 years. The human cost of industrialization. The human cost of Manchester's rapid industrialization cannot be overstated. While the city boomed economically, the working class paid the price. Children were employed in factories alongside adults, starting work at the age of 5 or 6, operating dangerous machinery and working long hours for a fraction of what adults earned. Many children were sent under the machines to retrieve fallen cotton or to fix machinery, tasks that were too small for adults to do. It was common for children to suffer life-threatening injuries or die from accidents. The factories themselves are a maze of dangerous machinery. Workers are surrounded by whirring machines, spinning wheels, and grinding gears that never stop. The air is filled with cotton dust, so thick that it settles on everything, from workers' clothing to their lungs. In many factories, ventilation is poor, and the walls are caked with soot and dust. The machines run constantly, and the factory whistle signals the beginning and end of the day's grueling labor. In the poorer neighborhoods, children work alongside their parents in the same factories. In fact, many families rely on their children's wages to survive. The work is physically demanding and often dangerous. Accidents are frequent, with workers losing limbs, becoming crushed under machines, or succumbing to diseases brought on by the poor working conditions. Scene 5. The rise of the factory owners and wealth disparity. While the workers toil in the factories, the men who own and run them accumulate enormous wealth. The industrialists, often referred to as the captains of industry, benefit from the enormous scale of mass production. These factory owners and entrepreneurs invest in land, machines, and technology to maximize efficiency and output. They are the driving force behind Manchester's economic boom but their wealth stands in stark contrast to the poverty faced by the workers they employ. These factory owners, like Richard Arkwright, Samuel Gregg, and John Kay, have amassed fortunes from the growth of the cotton industry. Their wealth allows them to live in grand homes and partake in the luxuries of life, far removed from the harsh conditions faced by their workers. As Manchester becomes the centre of the textile industry, these industrialists are revered as visionaries, the pioneers of the modern age. They push for technological advancements, but they often do so without regard for the well-being of their workforce. In the wealthy districts of Manchester, life is dramatically different. The industrialists' grand houses stand in stark contrast to the cramped, polluted living conditions of the working class. These homes are located away from the smoke and soot of the factories, with large gardens, private rooms, and plenty of space to enjoy the fruits of industrialization. The families that live in these homes, however, are blind to the struggles of the working class population. They rarely step outside of their circle, and their social interactions are confined to the elite circles of industrial society. In the emerging class system, a clear divide forms between the wealthy industrialists and the working class factory labourers. The enormous wealth accumulated by the factory owners is juxtaposed against the meagre wages of the workers. Despite the immense profit flowing through the city, this wealth is not shared with the labourers who power the machines. The middle class, those who manage the factories and oversee the work, benefit from their proximity to wealth, while the poor remain mired in poverty. Scene 6. The political and social unrest. As the disparity between the wealthy and the working class grows, so too does the sense of injustice and frustration among the workers. In the 1850s, Manchester becomes a breeding ground for political and social unrest. The factory workers, tired of their dangerous working conditions, long hours, and low wages, begin to demand change. This is a period where social movements, labour strikes, and political activism come to the forefront of public life. In Manchester, the struggle for workers' rights takes on new urgency. The rise of trade unions, which are formed to advocate for the rights of workers, becomes a key development. While early attempts at labour movements face significant opposition from factory owners and the government, the seeds of social change are planted. The Factory Acts, which regulate working hours and conditions, are passed in response to pressure from labour movements and social reformers. However, these acts are just the beginning of a long battle for workers' rights. In 1838, the Chartist movement gains momentum, calling for political reforms such as universal suffrage and better working conditions for all. While the Chartists do not succeed in fully achieving their goals, they bring attention to the harsh realities of industrial society and inspire future movements for social reform. The struggle for voting rights, the fight for better wages, and the demand for improved living conditions will continue well into the 20th century. The workers of Manchester begin to demand not only better pay, but also better living conditions, as overcrowded slums become breeding grounds for disease and despair. Social reformers like Friedrich Engels, who writes about the conditions of the working class in his famous work, The Condition of the Working Class in England, highlight the plight of factory workers and the need for social and political change. Scene 7. Public health crisis and the fight for sanitation. The rapid industrialization of Manchester brings with it a severe public health crisis. As the city grows, so too do the problems of overcrowding, pollution, and disease. The narrow streets of the city become choked with smoke from factory chimneys and dust from cotton mills. The once pristine Thames River is now heavily polluted. its waters carrying not only the waste of factories, but also the filth of the rapidly growing population. In the slums, families live in squalor, with inadequate access to clean water and sanitation. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, and smallpox spread easily in these conditions. The lack of proper sewage systems exacerbates the situation. It's common for waste to be dumped into the streets or the river, leading to unsanitary conditions and the rapid spread of disease. By the mid-19th century, the death toll from diseases like cholera is staggering. In 1849, a cholera epidemic kills thousands of people in Manchester alone. Public health campaigns begin to gain traction as social reformers push for improvements to the city's sanitation system. A few early efforts are made to address the issue, such as the construction of sewer systems by engineer Joseph Bazalgette, who begins to implement revolutionary improvements to the city's sanitation infrastructure. However, the full implementation of these reforms takes time. Public health is not prioritized until it becomes a matter of life and death for the population. But the groundwork is laid in the 1850s as reformers, scientists, and political figures push for the modernization of urban planning, better waste management, and improved healthcare. Scene 8. The rise of women in the workforce. As the 19th century progresses, one of the most significant social shifts in Manchester is the rise of women in the workforce. While men have traditionally been the breadwinners in British society, the expansion of the factory system provides new opportunities for women, particularly in the cotton mills. In Manchester, women make up a significant portion of the workforce. They work long hours in the factories, operating the spinning machines and looms that churn out cotton at an unprecedented rate. These women, often from poor rural areas or immigrant communities, are drawn to Manchester by the promise of work in the industrial sector. However, life in the factories is far from glamorous. Women work under the same harsh conditions as their male counterparts, often in dangerous environments. They earn much less than men and are subject to sexual harassment and exploitation. Yet, despite the difficulties, many women find factory work to be a source of independence and economic stability, even as they struggle to assert their rights in a male-dominated workforce. As the Industrial Revolution progresses, the role of women in the workforce becomes a topic of social and political debate. The growing number of women employed in factories leads to the formation of female labor movements demanding better pay, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. These movements will lay the foundation for the feminist labor rights movements of the future. Scene 9. The global impact of Manchester's industrial growth. Manchester, as the epicenter of the Industrial Revolution, has a profound impact not just on Britain, but on the world. As the global textile market grows, the city's factories supply cotton and finished goods to countries across Europe, the Americas, and beyond. The city's role as a trading hub connects it to the farthest corners of the globe. The cotton industry, in particular, has an international reach. Manchester's mills spin cotton from the Americas, turning it into fabric that is sold around the world. However, the global success of the cotton industry comes at a cost. Much of the cotton used in Manchester's factories comes from the southern United States, where slavery is still legal. The exploitation of enslaved people becomes intertwined with the economic success of Manchester, linking the global economy with the exploitation of human beings. The story of Manchester's rise is a story of both progress and exploitation, one where innovation and economic success coexist with inequality and injustice. The city's growth during the 1850s becomes a symbol of the larger forces at play during the Industrial Revolution, as the demands of industrialization shape the lives of workers, women, and entire communities. Scene 10. The growth of infrastructure and urban development. By the 1850s, the sheer scale of industrial growth in Manchester demands a corresponding expansion of the city's infrastructure. The Industrial Revolution has reshaped not only the economy, but also the very physical layout of the city. As the population grows, the need for better housing, transport, and urban amenities becomes undeniable. New neighborhoods are built to accommodate the growing workforce. These neighborhoods, however, are often overcrowded and lack proper sanitation. The city's development proceeds rapidly, but urban planning lags behind. The streets of Manchester are now filled with rows of terraced houses, small, uniform homes that serve as a temporary solution to the growing population. Though the industrialists have prospered, the working-class residents of these areas live in cramped conditions, where families often occupy just a few rooms. With the rapid rise of factories and new housing comes the need for transportation improvements. Horse-drawn trams are introduced to help people travel between the expanding suburbs and the city centre. But these early public transportation systems are far from ideal, moving slowly and struggling to meet the demands of the growing population. This is a precursor to the city's future infrastructure, which will continue to develop as the city grows and modernizes. Despite the expansion of infrastructure, the quality of life for the working class remains poor. The overcrowding in the industrial districts of Manchester leads to the development of slums, where basic necessities like clean water and waste management are in short supply. The growing disparity between the wealthy industrialists and the struggling working-class population is starkly visible in the physical landscape of the city. Grand factory owners live in large homes, with access to modern conveniences, while workers struggle to make ends meet in poorly constructed and overcrowded housing. The rapid urbanization and industrialization of Manchester in the 19th century bring with them a growing public health crisis. As more people move into the city, living in overcrowded conditions, sanitation becomes a major concern. The city's infrastructure, which was never designed to handle such a large population, fails to keep pace with the rapid growth. The lack of proper sewage systems and clean water leads to frequent outbreaks of disease. Cholera, a waterborne illness, sweeps through the crowded, unsanitary neighborhoods, killing thousands. The absence of a proper sewage system means that human waste is often disposed of directly into the streets or the Thames, contaminating the water supply. The city's response to the public health crisis is slow, but change begins to come in the mid-19th century. Social reformers, scientists, and politicians begin to push for improvements in sanitation and public health. In 1842, Edwin Chadwick, a leading social reformer, publishes his influential report on the sanitary condition of the labouring population, highlighting the need for better waste management and clean water systems. Joseph Bazalgette, an engineer, becomes a key figure in improving public health in London, and his work in the 1850s and 1860s will later inspire the development of modern sewage systems in cities like Manchester. Bazalgette's plans for a modern sewer system designed to divert waste away from the Thames are a major breakthrough in improving urban sanitation. Although his work begins in London, it will soon influence other cities, including Manchester, as they work to modernize their infrastructure and address the health crises that have plagued them for decades. While these improvements are crucial, they are not a quick fix. public health remains a significant challenge for Manchester throughout the century. The battle against disease and the fight for better living conditions will continue to shape the city's development long after the Industrial Revolution. Scene 12. The cultural impact of the Industrial Revolution. While the Industrial Revolution transformed Manchester's economy, it also had a profound impact on its culture. The 19th century was a time of rapid change, not just in industry and commerce, but in the arts, literature, and intellectual life. As the city grew, so did its cultural life. Writers like Charles Dickens, Elizabeth Gaskell, and Friedrich Engels began to write about the stark contrast between the wealthy industrialists and the impoverished working class. Their works paint a picture of the industrial city as both a marvel of human progress and a place of profound social inequality. Engels, The Condition of the Working Class in England, 1845, which describes the dire conditions in Manchester's industrial districts, becomes one of the most significant critiques of the social cost of industrialization. Engels, himself a German intellectual, observes firsthand the suffering of factory workers and their families. His book becomes a rallying cry for reformers and labor activists, urging society to recognize the human cost of industrial progress. Meanwhile, writers like Elizabeth Gaskell, who was born in Manchester, also wrote about the social and economic changes taking place in the city. Her novel, North and South, 1854, tells the story of the tensions between the industrial North and the rural South, focusing on the challenges faced by workers in industrialized towns like Manchester. Gaskell's work offers a more empathetic view of the industrial poor, highlighting their struggles and the social injustice they face. The cultural scene in Manchester also begins to flourish during the Industrial Revolution. As the middle class grows in wealth and influence, the demand for culture and leisure activities increases. New theatres, museums, and concert halls open to cater to this new class of consumers. Public institutions like the Manchester Art Gallery are established, reflecting the city's increasing interest in the arts. At the same time, Manchester's industrial prosperity attracts intellectuals, scientists, and thinkers. The city becomes a centre for innovation and progress, hosting conferences, lectures, and exhibitions on everything from engineering to philosophy. The 1851 Great Exhibition in London, which showcases the achievements of the Industrial Revolution, draws attention to the innovations that cities like Manchester are producing. Despite the cultural boom, the gap between the rich and the poor remains wide. While the middle and upper classes enjoy cultural advancements and leisure, the working class continues to suffer in poor conditions. However, this growing cultural awareness also helps foster the social reforms that will change the city's future. Scene 13. The role of women and children in Manchester's factories. One of the most disturbing aspects of industrial Manchester is the widespread use of women and children in factory labour. As industrialization takes hold, the demand for cheap labour increases, and women and children are often employed in factories at a fraction of the cost of adult male workers. Women make up a significant portion of the workforce in Manchester's factories. They are employed to operate machines like spinning jennies and looms, performing tasks that require dexterity but little physical strength. While this work provides a source of income for women, it is grueling, dangerous, and poorly compensated. Children are also a major part of the labor force. In the early days of industrialization, many factory owners see children as a cheap source of labor, and they are employed in large numbers. In some cases, children as young as 5 or 6 are sent into the factories to work long hours, operating dangerous machinery and performing tasks that would be physically demanding for even adults. Factory work is harsh for children. They are often assigned to crawl under machines to fix broken threads or collect cotton from the factory floor. The working conditions are dangerous, and injuries are common. For many of these children, factory work is not just a short-term solution. It becomes their entire childhood, with little opportunity for education or leisure. The exploitation of women and children in factories becomes one of the key issues for social reformers. As the Industrial Revolution progresses, calls for child labor laws and better working conditions grow louder. The first Factory Acts, passed in the 1830s and 1840s, set limits on the number of hours children can work and regulate the conditions in factories. These early laws, while not perfect, are a significant step forward in the fight for workers' rights. The expansion of Manchester's global influence. By the 1850s, Manchester has become the centre of the global textile industry. The city is known as Cottonopolis for its prominence in the global cotton trade, and its industrial products are shipped across the world. This newfound global influence solidifies Manchester's place as the powerhouse of industrial Britain. The success of Manchester is intricately tied to the growth of the British Empire, with raw cotton sourced from India and the Americas, particularly the southern United States, processed in the city's factories. The raw materials from the colonies flow into Manchester, where they are spun, woven, and turned into textiles that are then exported worldwide. The city's factories produce cloth for every continent, making it one of the most important industrial hubs in the world. However, the growth of Manchester's global influence comes at a significant human cost. Much of the cotton is harvested by enslaved labor in the southern United States. The connection between the wealth generated by Manchester's textile mills and the exploitation of enslaved labor across the Atlantic is a harsh reality of the Industrial Revolution. While Manchester's factories boom, the slave trade and the brutal conditions of plantation workers in the American South continue to fuel the growth of industrial Britain. At the same time, Manchester becomes a focal point for global trade and finance. Its central position within the British Empire and the Industrial Revolution gives it unparalleled access to international markets. The city's commercial district thrives, with banks, shipping companies, and merchant houses handling the vast transactions that keep the economy moving. Manchester is at the heart of this global network, and the prosperity that it brings reverberates throughout the entire empire. Scene 15. The rise of social reform movements. As the 1850s unfold, the growing inequality in Manchester becomes increasingly evident. While the factory owners and industrialists enjoy vast wealth, the working-class population remains mired in poverty, living in overcrowded slums with poor sanitation. The struggle for better working conditions and living standards becomes a central issue, and Manchester becomes a hotbed for social reform movements. The social divide in Manchester is stark. Factory owners live in large homes with access to modern amenities, while workers endure terrible conditions in factory-owned housing. The factory system exploits the working class, especially women and children, and many reformers begin to question the morality of this system. One of the most significant reform movements is the push for better working conditions and the right to vote. Social reformers like Robert Owen and Charles Kingsley call for changes in factory regulations, including the limitation of working hours and the introduction of better safety standards. The establishment of labor unions also gains momentum, as workers organize for the first time to demand better pay and conditions. Meanwhile, The rise of socialism begins to influence Manchester's social movements. The ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who lived in Manchester for a time, begin to spread. Engels' book, The Condition of the Working Class in England, published in 1845, becomes a key text in exposing the brutal realities of industrial life. Engels argues that the working class is being exploited and that the industrial capitalist system is inherently unjust. The reform movements of the 1850s lay the groundwork for the social changes that will come later in the century. The city's industrial prosperity is built on the backs of the working poor. But as these social movements gain traction, the demand for justice and equality grows louder. Scene 16. The role of education and the spread of knowledge. As Manchester becomes a global industrial centre, the importance of education and the spread of knowledge grows. The 19th century sees the rise of educational institutions designed to meet the needs of the growing urban population. Schools, libraries, and technical colleges begin to proliferate across the city, providing new opportunities for working-class children to escape the cycle of poverty that plagues their parents. The growing middle class, too, seeks better education, with many factory owners sending their children to elite schools to be trained in business, science, and the arts. The rapid industrialization of Manchester demands an educated workforce, one that can adapt to new technologies and processes. Thus, the foundation for modern education in Manchester is laid, creating a more educated population that will drive the future of industry, commerce, and innovation. The Manchester Mechanics Institute, founded in the early 19th century, is one such institution that promotes the education of working-class people. The institute offers classes in science, engineering, and mathematics, subjects that are essential for those working in factories and workshops. The movement for educational reform is seen as crucial in improving the quality of life for the working class and providing them with the tools to rise above their circumstances. This push for education is not without its challenges. For many, sending children to school means taking them out of the factory, where their wages are essential for the family's survival. Child labour remains a pervasive issue in Manchester, and many families are reluctant to sacrifice their children's income for education. But as the 19th century progresses, the importance of education begins to take hold, and changes in labour laws start to improve the prospects of working-class children. Scene 17. Technological advances and their impact on society. While Manchester's transformation into an industrial hub is marked by its factories and mills, it is also characterized by the rapid development of new technologies. The city's engineers, inventors, and entrepreneurs constantly push the boundaries of what is possible, using steam, coal, and machinery to create innovations that will change the world. In 1830, George Stephenson's steam locomotive, the Rocket, is introduced to the world at the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, the first fully operational railway line. This revolutionizes transportation, allowing goods and people to travel across the country faster than ever before. The expansion of the railway network further integrates Manchester into a broader national and global economy, enabling the flow of raw materials to the city and finished goods to markets across Britain and beyond. At the same time, new technologies in textile manufacturing, like the power loom and spinning mule, allow for even greater efficiency in cotton production. These machines, powered by steam engines, are able to produce far more fabric than the hand-operated machines they replace. The relentless march of technological progress drives Manchester's economy, but it also accelerates the exploitation of labour. With the introduction of more machines, Factory owners demand higher output from their workers, pushing them to work longer hours for less pay. But it's not just the industrial sector that benefits from technological innovation. The development of the telegraph, for example, allows Manchester's merchants and factory owners to communicate quickly across long distances. The telegraph becomes an essential tool for conducting business and managing trade, linking Manchester with the rest of Britain and the world. The ability to communicate instantly marks a dramatic shift in the speed and efficiency of business, further fueling the expansion of the industrial economy. Scene 18. The environmental impact of industrialization. While Manchester's industrial growth brings economic prosperity, it also brings significant environmental challenges. The rapid expansion of factories and mills has a profound impact on the city's air and water quality. The city's sky is often shrouded in thick smoke from the chimneys of factories, and the River Thames, once a vital trade route, is now polluted with waste from factories and sewage from the rapidly growing population. The smog that blankets Manchester becomes one of the defining features of the industrial city. The city's inhabitants live under a constant cloud of soot and smoke, which has a serious impact on public health. Respiratory diseases, including tuberculosis, become common, particularly among factory workers who are exposed to the toxic air day in and day out. The pollution also affects the city's water supply. The Thames, once a source of fresh water, becomes heavily polluted, carrying disease and waste into the heart of the city. Clean drinking water becomes a rare commodity in Manchester, and sanitation remains an issue for the working-class districts. The environmental consequences of industrialization are profound, and the health of the city's inhabitants continues to be threatened by pollution. As the century progresses, the public becomes more aware of the environmental impact of industrialization. Reformers and scientists begin to call for cleaner air, better waste management, and greater awareness of the long-term effects of industrialization on the environment. The environmental cost of progress becomes a pressing issue, one that will continue to shape the development of industrial cities around the world. Scene 19. Looking toward the future. As we reflect on Manchester in the 1850s, it's clear that the city is at the forefront of global industrialization. The innovations of the time, railways, steam engines, mechanized factories, and telegraphs, set the stage for the modern world. But with this progress comes a deep social divide, where wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority struggle to survive in poverty. The city's transformation into an industrial powerhouse brings with it both opportunity and hardship. The lives of workers and the environment suffer under the relentless pace of progress, but their efforts lay the foundation for the modern world. Manchester in the 1850s is not just a symbol of industrial power. It is a microcosm of the challenges that come with rapid societal and economic change. The struggles of the working class, the rise of labor movements, and the social reforms that emerge from this period are all part of the ongoing journey toward a fairer and more just society. As we look toward the future, Manchester's story is one of reinvention. It's a city that will continue to evolve, adapting to the demands of the modern world, while still carrying the scars of its industrial past.